10 bans, EU changes, and preseason rankings. Happy New Year, everybody. PrimeTime eSports is back. Greetings, Summoners, and welcome back to the #1 place to get your current League of Legends news. It's good to have you back, and it's good to be back, discussing all the pressing issues in League of Legends that matter to you in esports. As 2016 began to come to a close, there were calls for change in the Championship Series structure. Well, Riot was listening and has taken unprecedented action before the spring season, changing rules regarding third-party arbitration during disciplinary hearings, Challenger Series sister team policies, and the relegation system. The biggest change so far is the reconfiguration of the pick ban system. Starting in the spring split, the LCS will change from 6 bans to 10. The first phase will retain the traditional 3 bans per team. The system then allows each team to pick 3 champions before banning 2 more and then picking their last 2 champions, rounding off their team compositions. Interestingly enough, Riot will break the tradition of using public servers to test out changes to the pro scene, bringing the new system to the LCS first before taking it live. Now, all right, guys. Well, welcome back. That was a little hard transition. But first of all, how's you guys' break? How was your time off?
I had a great break. A lot of action in the off season happened over the winter break, so I can't complain.
Yep, fairly uneventful for me. Got to gain some elo on the Rift, but
yeah, we all know all you guys did was binge League of Legends. But let's get into this talking point right now. First of all, what do you think about the 10 bans? How will this reshape the way things are in League?
I think 10 bans is a great thing. I think first and foremost, the big change that it's going to have is it's going to cause the meta to be more diverse. Right now, we see at most around a 20 champion-ish meta, and with 10 bans, teams are going to have to bring more than that to the table, considering individual players can be target banned out, and just more OP picks will be able to be banned away and picked up.
I think players with larger champ pools will be rewarded more heavily. You see a lot of these pro players sort of talk about very briefly whether they have like a large champion pool or whether they tend to practice 4 to 5 champions for LCS. That's going to become a much more important trait to have, I think.
How will this affect coaching in the scene? We just saw coaches kind of get established now, like every team has some form of coach for the last couple of years, but now will they expand their staff? And also, how does this affect players going in? As you said, champion pools have to expand. But what about those players that are known for like a few specific champions? If they can't adapt, what do you think might happen to them as far as viability in League now?
So I think as far as the players that can't really adapt, it's going to be really rough for them. Hopefully the team might be able to cover for them depending on the team that they are on. The problem that I see it affecting the most is possibly either top lane or mid lane. Not so much jungle and like AD carry and support these days because of how the meta has been lately. But yeah, it'll be definitely interesting to see, and there will be an adjustment period.
I think with coaches, it's hard to speculate because of how little we know about how coaching in the LCS works. But I think that one thing that's for certain is that we're not going to see large staff increases until the money that teams are able to pull in, and I mean they can't even pay players what they want to right now. So why would they be able to bring in more staff? So I think that until the amount of money that teams are able to ship out to players and coaches increases, we're not going to see an increase in staff.
So you're saying that basically the burden will be, an even heavier burden will be placed on coaches than there already is.
I think it depends on the team. A good point I've seen a couple players raise, including Bjergsen, is that based on what team you're on will change how much impact the coach has in that pick ban. Some teams will go in and the coach will say, these are primary picks that are up. Which ones do you guys want? There's this matchup. What do you want with this? whereas other teams, the coach is pretty much making all the decisions and saying, these are the tools we're giving you, go do what you can.
And actually, personally, and I want to direct this part of the discussion to Muhammad, I feel like this will kind of, we already talked about diversity, but it's almost like for the worst teams in the league, this will give them more of a shot because at the very least, they can ban out the other team's comfort picks and try and basically drag that good team like a TSM or Cloud9 down to their level by making them play second-tier champions into them.
Yeah, I tend to agree for the most part. I think that the exception being really exceptional players like Bjergsen, who are known to have like a large champion pool for the mid lane. But as far as like players that are really advanced in their mechanics towards certain champions, it will definitely give a chance to those lower tier teams to sort of pop up.
Okay. And so I have the sense that we can all agree that this was a healthy change for League overall.
I think so. I think it really brings opportunities for those like lower tier teams, like we were saying.
Well, staying on the subject of change, not only did big change come to the LCS rules, it also came to one of the more underperforming and volatile regions, one that really desperately needed it. In the EU LCS, Riot heard the uproar of fans over the current, arguably contentious best-of-2 format and changed the scene to a best-of-3 series structure that mirrors Korea and North America. But what is being seen by some as taking a step back after taking 2 steps forward, Europe will take an element from China and add a group stage to the league's configuration. There will be 2 groups, Group A and Group B, that will play in a round-robin format, each team playing teams from their group twice and teams from the other group once. Teams were assigned to their groups last week through a snake draft that took place privately between the teams. The 2 top teams in pro points were placed in their groups first. Then they selected the team to be put in the opposite group. The next team to pick, designated B2, is a team chosen by the first seed, designated A1, since A1 chose before B1, and this continued until the groups were chosen. These are the official groups released by Riot. In Group A, G2, Fnatic, Misfits, Giants, and Rawcat, and in Group B, H2K, Splice, Unicorns of Love, Vitality, and Origin. Now let's get back to the desk, gentlemen. First of all, do you feel like this was a 2 steps back and 1 step forward for scenario? Or, my words, 2 steps forward and 1 step back scenario? Why go to a snake draft and why go to group stage?
I got to be honest, I really don't like this whole like group stage thing. I think that the way it was chosen, although it's most fair to have the 2 quote-unquote best teams, the top placing teams in Europe, be the 2 first, to be in opposite groups and then start the snake from there. I just think it's stupid because although it might be fair, it's not guaranteed that those 2 are still the top teams. And so there's a chance that Europe, by adopting this strategy, might actually starve themselves out of potentially having their 2 best teams go forward with favorable seeding into playoffs and so on. Because, for example, they could have a Fnatic and somebody else be in the same group and potentially be the 2 best teams, whereas the other group doesn't have the same caliber of teams. And so, as a whole, they won't get as much experience playing across groups, and it's an unhealthy dynamic, in my opinion.
So I think the main problem that it exposes is that the way the system is set up currently, the teams in each group, both Group A and B, will get to play against teams in the opposite group only once during the split. I think that while at least 1 game against a team in the opposite group is a good opportunity, it's much worse than what it was previously, where the teams sort of had an array of like every team in the EU LCS to sort of get practice off of and sort of strengthen their own play. But with this sort of snake draft system, it limits a lot of the variety that the teams are going to have and a lot of the exposure that they're used to. So it'll be interesting to see if perhaps maybe like different metas develop or different pick and ban priorities, but we'll see with time.
And some people are even going as far as saying, they're worried that it might develop into, just 1 bad group and then 1 good group, and then they haven't gone anywhere from the best-of-2 system because it's still 2 very different dynamics going in. How do you guys feel? Do you think there will be just, 1 really good group and then 1 poor group, or do you think it's fair and balanced and, everything's going to work out?
I mean, I think we're going to have to wait and see, considering the amount of roster changes that there were. Mm-hmm. But I think at this point it's 50-50, and I'm kind of pessimistic about how this is going to go. I think it's going to be one group has a lot of solid teams, and the other group has bottom table teams. But even if it isn't, it still doesn't justify the system.
I'm a little bit more optimistic about it. I feel like it has a lot of apparent cons when looking at it on paper, but we have to see how it plays out. If the teams on both sides can match up fairly equally in skill level, then it would be a better system for those lower tier teams that are actually in each group. They get more opportunities to face off against higher end teams.
And to be honest, my only kind of hesitance to fully buy into this system really is that in traditional sports, this does work, but they usually have more teams. Right now, we only have 10 teams in the EULCS, and maybe if it was like maybe 15 or 20 teams, then a snake draft would make it more balanced, to see more variety. But it's only 5 teams per group, and a lot of these teams last year barely even made it past relegation. I think I have to take Andy's side here, and I just don't see this change actually panning out.
Fair enough. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
So, and then finally, my last question on this subject is, do you think this will get Europe prepared for Worlds? As in, it's no longer just luck that they kind of get there. We know, last year, H2K had a good-ish performance at Worlds, but it was only because their group kind of fell apart. And then before that, we had G2, who they failed everywhere internationally. So do you think this will improve the competitive nature of this region?
So, like we sort of mentioned earlier a bit, it really depends on how the teams perform very heavily. This system, because of the small number of teams in each group, really depends on performance of those teams in the groups. So we know, with any given 10-team system, that's usually the traditional way to go. 3 or 4 of the teams should be performing at a relatively high level compared to the rest. But with Snake, you have to have at least 4 or 5 teams to match that sort of ratio that was given in the first place, with 10 teams in one group.
Yeah, I agree. I really think that the system is going to fail to highlight the best teams in Europe, and is instead kind of giving the little guys a chance to catch up. And I think if Europe wants to be a World's contender and be taken seriously internationally as a region, I think that they need to adopt a system that would better highlight that.
Well, they might soon become that because, as we all know, roster mania was red hot coming into the final weeks of 2016, and with new talent arriving from home and abroad, there has been increased anticipation coming into the 2017 season. Teams like the newly formed Dignitas and an evolved Team Liquid have raised the stakes in North America, among changes in Europe and other regions, making for an exciting upcoming season. Gentlemen, I want to get straight to this one. I want to hear first Mohammed, then Andy, where you rank the regions coming into 2017 as far as those that improved the most, those that improved the least, and which ones you think will come out the strongest in 2017.
Okay, so here comes my NA bias here, but I'm a little hesitant to put NA in the higher rankings as far as regions go because of the badly battered dreams that we had with this past Worlds. But I will say I have Korea as number 1 for obvious reasons, and then underneath them I will put NA for now. And then as we go down the list, I have EU under that and China as the 4th region in the list.
So, obviously, because, it's Korea, so they kind of have a holding place number 1, and then SKT also became stronger. But why NA over China? Other than hope, which you seem to have a lack of. But besides that, why NA over China?
Okay, so I feel like North America has been getting a lot of strong players coming into the region, and not just that, but the players that were previously new imports have had some time to sort of coalesce and become part of NA and sort of get more comfortable playing on a North American team. Not just that, but also China has had some rocky shifting in the offseason. post-Worlds. Some of the Korean players, notable ones, have left to go back to Korea. A lot of the Chinese teams sort of have communication problems if they're not all 100% Chinese, but China is sort of a big question mark for me, and I think for a lot of people right now.
That big Korean re-exodus was, I kind of do want to say shocking because, a lot of the Korean players were over there for money, but it seems a lot more of them are now going over either because they're getting older in age and they want to win, or because they just flat out want to win and China just wasn't doing it after the multiple failures. But Andy, I feel like you had some rebuttal to Mohammed's points.
Unfortunately, I agree with most of what he said. I think that I think he's right that a lot of China's best players are leaving, especially with the formation of the KT super team over in Korea. In terms of who's most improved, I mean, you could technically put Korea at the bottom of most improved and put Wildcard at the top. I mean, Wildcard came into Worlds and actually put up a decent showing, better than we were expecting. I'll give them that. Yeah. And I mean, Korea won Worlds again, so technically they didn't improve at all, but it's hard to improve when you are the best. But yeah, I got NA as number 2 under Korea, and I put EU over China because, like Mohammed said, a lot of players left China, but I am hesitant. I do think that good Chinese teams like EDG will still be able to show us something on the international stage, and we're still waiting for NA to actually show themselves in an international tournament. So.
Okay. Well, speaking of NA, we're going to highlight over the next couple of weeks before and a little bit into the LCS starting the top 10 teams that we think, or not the top 10, but the order of which the 10 teams in each region will be in competition. Today, we're going to start with NA. Andy, list down in order your top 10 NA teams. Give a brief reason why each one is there.
All right, so I'll say number 1 is TSM, and there are 2 reasons for that. The first one being is fan bias, but on a more serious note, I think that the AD carry right now is one of the lowest impact roles in League of Legends, and so I think that even though you lose Doublelift as a shot caller and you pick up Wild Turtle, his job as just damage dealer is significantly I wouldn't say easier, but less impactful. So I think that change will hurt them less than some of the other roster changes that other teams are seeing. Second up, I have Immortals. After that IEM showing that we saw from them, I think they're a really solid team. I think they have an insane skill ceiling, and once they're able to play with a little bit more cohesion, I think they'll be a great team. Third, I have CLG, Got the Faith. Same roster, and with the same roster, you say they have that cohesion, and they're a great team individually. Fourth up, I have Dignitas. I think that someday in Chaser, if they're able to perform, Dignitas will be one of the best teams in North America because of the fact that they have Laud and Xpecial in the bot lane. I think that they have that solid foundation that they're looking for. And 5, I have C9. I think Contracts is a minor upgrade, but to be honest, I think these other NA teams are just outshining them. You look like you don't agree, but you can wait. Number 6, I have TL. I can't put any more into TL after the last 3 splits of betting on them and just not really seeing results, not seeing much improvement. And then 7 is P1, but I do think that there's a chance P1 climbs into top 5. They do have a solid roster. I think Zig is one of the most underrated players in the LCS. I think he does a lot with a little, and I think we'll see a lot of that this year. And then Echo Fox, Envious, and Fly are all teams that look like they don't belong in the LCS. The rosters on paper don't look solid, especially FlyQuest.
Yeah, I'm gonna disregard a good 4 teams off of the list, but
I think you're sleeping on FlyQuest.
I will. Perhaps. But I will say for my number 1 pick for the spring split has to be Counter Logic Gaming. And the reason for that is if you look, well, I am a bit of a CLG fan, but there's reasoning behind it. There's logic behind this. Basically, when you look back at the previous spring split that we had, there was a reason why CLG was dominating, and it was because they were the team with the least roster changes. They went into the split used to the team cohesion that they had previously, and they had good teamwork. They were able to win games as one whole unit, which is what everyone was sort of saying about them from the beginning, their main strength. So I have CLG first. Second place, Immortals. I have to agree with Andy on that one. Immortals' roster looks really good for this upcoming season. They picked up Dardoch and in the jungle, and the rest of the roster looks pretty solid, especially Pobelter staying in the mid lane. He's been a really good player that has been flying under the radar, so I want to see what that team can do. Number 3, I'm going to go out on a limb here and put TL as number 3, though they continuously disappoint. Hopefully this time with the addition of Rainover in the jungle and Piglet back in the AD carry position, we'll see just how well they can do. And I'll stick with top 3 and see what the rest does.
I have to agree with Mohammed on the number 1 being CLG, and it's because exactly the reason he said, because they had the least amount of roster changes. They didn't change anything at all, and as long as, first of all, as long as Zix can coach them like he always does, which he's been consistent, so he will, I think that they'll beat teams based mainly just off cohesion and superior macro play until summer split, and then that's when they'll fall apart because Darshan, Huhi, I can't believe they didn't get rid of Huhi, but that's not my money, so it's not my problem. I have to disagree with both of you, though, on Immortals second, and I'll tell you why. It's one word.
TSM.
Wrong. It's one word. He is the brightest star, but also the biggest detriment to their team, and it's Dardoch.
No.
I just don't, and it's a wild card. I could be completely wrong.
You are.
It's fine. But if Dardoch does not show that he has changed in his attitude, then I think that it is going to be incredibly hard for them to kind of keep the team cohesion and therefore place even top 4. I have them about 5 and 6 with Team Liquid. And at 3rd and 4th, I have Cloud9 and I have Dignitas. TSM I have 2nd because, you know, it's Wild Turtle, and they also made about the least amount of changes. I disagree with you on Cloud9 because you said Contracts is a minor upgrade. Did you not watch Contracts in the Challenger Series?
No, I did. But hear me out. Hear me out. So Meteos is not exactly a stellar player himself, and I think that when they bring in Contracts will take a more passive role, and that will give a larger shot calling role to one of the best supports in North America, which is Smoothie and Jensen. And I think that those two, given that light, will be able to carry Cloud9 to a higher position. Now, one reason, let's address Dardoch here, because I think this is a great thing that Cole brought up. Let's talk about Dardoch. So I think that when people talk about Dardoch, they're going to cite the Team Liquid documentary and say, oh, he's so toxic and he's horrible. But when you watch the documentary and you watch it, I mean, both sides of it are awful. I'm not justifying his actions, right? Like, he admits he was immature and stuff, but the environment that he was in on Team Liquid was awful. Not to mention, even without a camera, and then they bring one in and put it in the players' faces, and it just made everything worse. And when he went to Immortals, the owner of Immortals came out, and they talked together to the public saying, we think that putting him in this environment, in a positive environment where people around him aren't babying him, but they're able to understand his personality and how to work with him and help him mature, they think that he'll succeed. And I agree completely. And I think it's just an IEM in the off season, but I do think that we've already seen some improvements.
And then finally, I just think Dignitas 4th, mainly because their lineup is so powerful with Someday Chaser. I think that's kind of, Laud was probably the 3rd best AD carry last year. So I think, you know, the top 4, I think we all somewhat agree on. And then finally, I just, we're wrapping up. That's done. So thank you once again for joining us for the new year, episode 5. This is Perch Perkins with Andy and Mohammed. We will see you next Thursday.